Well, I got a couple guys who need some help with their lineup. As I talked to you about setting your fantasy lineup, and we talked about waiver wire. So every week I'll try to do this now that we're about at the midway point, trying to get you guys some wins instead of worrying about, well, should I start a guy who comes off the waiver wire? Then you're going to get a guy like me. You don't want a guy like me to help your fantasy team. You don't want a guy like that. You want a guy who's on your roster who can give you some points. The key here is to look at matchups. So you get a team that plays a lot of man coverage. We got Robert Newcomer, who is one of the guys who sent me about his fantasy team and thinks his team's injured. And it is looking from his roster, and he's got some knuckleheads. But he doesn't have a bad team. We'll get to you. And then, Matthew, you want to talk about your team. You got to start some people. You know, you've got a flex guy with 2 wide receivers and 2 running backs, and then you can add a 3rd wide receiver and your flex guy. So let's look at both of you guys and what you got going on. First of all, with you, Robert, look at matchups. You got Plexico Burris on your team. You're playing against Pittsburgh. They're going to pressure, and they got a great defense. But, you know, Eli Manning's going to have to throw it to win the game. And who's he going to throw it to? Plexico Burris is his guy. You got Willis McGay. He's going to get carries because of a rookie quarterback. You got to start looking and playing that game out in your mind. Now we're at the midway point almost in the season. So you got to start to say, okay, McGay, he gets 25 carries. He's good for it. And you got Dominic Rhodes, okay? So Rhodes isn't exactly going to, you know, they're the last rushing team in the league. I think 32nd in the NFL in rushing at 70 yards a game. But it's the Colts, and you got to expect that they're going to come around. So if they come around, you're going to, okay, Cotchery and Dwayne Bowe, wide receiver, probably not going to give you a whole lot. I mean, with Brett Favre, you can get it. But with Kansas City, even though Bowe's good, their offense isn't very good. With Larry Johnson out, I mean, now, here's one thing. With Larry Johnson out, because of his off-the-field stuff, they may have to throw more. And what happens now is that you're playing from behind a lot if you're Kansas City, so Bowe may get you a couple. So don't panic. Relax. I think you're going to be okay. But I would, and Matt Castle's your quarterback. Well, Moss and Welker playing against the St. Louis Rams. You know what? It could give you a 3-touchdown game. Stick with it, because a guy like Jamarcus Russell, who's still young and learning, when he gives you 2 or 3 games in a row, maybe you could snatch him off the waiver wire. But, Robert, you're going to be fine. You don't have that many knuckleheads. It's just a lineup you got to mix and match because you lost some of your guys to injury. Now, Matthew, on the other side, I'm sitting here looking at yours. You got Jeff Garcia against Dallas. I think that Garcia and Tampa are going to play well. Garcia's still got big game numbers in him for fantasy, and I like him this week. You got 3 running backs now you can have. I mean, or 2 running backs and a flex guy. So you want to go running back heavy if you can. Marshawn Lynch against Miami is a good one because Buffalo is playing really good, and Trent Edwards will throw it to him. And you got Lee Evans at wide receiver. I like both those guys. Bunch them up now with Marshawn Lynch and Lee Evans, because if one, you may get 2 big games from both, and then Lee Evans is a big play guy, and Trent Edwards has 25 of 30 last week. So you got him, meaning Marshawn Lynch and Lee Evans, and even though you don't have Trent Edwards, he can throw it. And then you got the couple other wide receivers. You got Welker and Deshaun Jackson. Play them both. I mean, you got 3 guys, and you can play them, and then you're a flex guy as another running back. What about, you've got Julius Jones as a second one. What about Aaron Stecker? McAllister, Reggie Bush, both out. McAllister off the field, going to be suspended because of the drug policy. And then with Reggie Bush out, Stecker's going to get the majority of the carries in London. So that's not bad. So Lynch, Stecker, and then Julius Jones. Matt Hasselbeck's out. So and they got to run the football, and they're playing San Francisco. So I'm not down on your lineup at all. And look down with Jason Witten as your tight end. It's a keeper every week. And then Matt Bryant, your kicker against the Cowboys. Even though it may not be a high-scoring game, it may take 4 field goals to win the game, even if the Cowboys' defense, and you'd think that they're going to have to step up their game, so it may take field goals. So I look at yours, and I don't think that you got a bad team. I really don't. So you could play in a flex guy, obviously, with the 3 wide receivers, and you add 3 running backs. You've got a chance for some big points, but don't sleep on Aaron Stecker against the Chargers. Chargers defense has been overrated all year long. Now, they may step up, but the Saints got to rely on Stecker and Breeze and Marcus Colston. That's what they're going to have to rely on because they're hurt, and they also lost a couple defensive guys. So this could be an offensive. I mean, they may have to throw it. Stecker can catch it and run it. So I kind of like this. So Matthew and Steve, Matthew and Robert, you don't have to panic about this. I love doing this for you guys. You're a lot smarter than I am. But when I look at it, look deep and hard about coverages and what kind of scheme. For instance, if you had a Pittsburgh Steeler receiver on your team, even though they're not, or Ben Roethlisberger as your quarterback, the Giants like to pressure. The Giants like to pressure, so that means you may have to throw some or get some draws or screens into a guy like Mewelde Moore. And I know you guys, neither one of you guys have him, but that's what you've got to start thinking about in your fantasy. Don't just look at, the St. Louis Rams aren't any good. Start to look at the philosophy of your defensive or offensive coordinator and how bad or good a team is, because a team may be awful. If you're Detroit, what do you got to lose if you got, you know what? You may take the quarterback and say, let me have him because all they're going to do is throw every down. So it's interesting to look at. But Robert, Matthew, and everybody else who, sent me their emails to fantasy at opensports.com. Keep doing it. We'll do this every week to try and help you set your lineups. I appreciate you guys, and I hope your fantasy team's doing better than the guy you're competing against this week. Good luck.
So you think you can tackle a pro? There's only one way to find out. Click on fantasy at opensports.com.